Miller.
Here.
English.
Here.
McEvers.
Here.
Ettinger.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Gookin.
Here. Let's please rise for the invocation. We have Pastor David Warnick from the New Life Church.
Lord Jesus, we're asking you for wisdom from above for this body. You tell us that there are those occasions when we don't have because we haven't asked. And we ask you to grant that wisdom that's pure, that's peaceable, that brings good fruit, that's gentle, and brings a harvest of righteousness. And we trust you for it. In your mighty name, amen.
Lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I don't believe we have any amendments to the agenda, so we will move on to presentations. And Bev Moss. Is Bev here? I have a proclamation that I'd like to read and present to Bev on Bike Month. So the proclamation says, whereas for more than a century, the bicycle has provided an independent form of transportation for many Americans, and whereas more than 100 million Americans engage in bicycling today for fun, fitness, sport, and recreation and transportation, whereas the use of bicycles for transportation and recreation benefits all citizens of Coeur d'Alene, whereas the City of Coeur d'Alene has worked steadily to encourage bicycling as a healthy mode of transportation and recreation, whereas each year the City of Coeur d'Alene and the League of American Bicyclists recognize National Bike Month and promoting bicycling events like Bike to Work Week. Now, therefore, I, Steve Widmeyer, Mayor of the City of Coeur d'Alene, do hereby proclaim the month of June as Bike Month.
All right. On behalf of all the cyclists here in Coeur d'Alene and all those coming this weekend, we thank you for this.
I'm gonna turn around really quick here. Real quick. Smile, Bev. Perfect, thank you. Next on the agenda, we have the introduction of our new wastewater superintendent, Mike Anderson, and Sam is going to do some introductions.
Thank you, Your Honor and Counsel. It's my great pleasure to introduce this evening the new wastewater superintendent, Mike Anderson. And I'm really glad we have such a fantastic audience all here for Mike this evening. This is fantastic. I'll let Mike kind of give his bio and speak a little bit, but I wanted to note that we've already been hearing wonderful things from the staff at the wastewater treatment plant. I think that's really, really important to mention how pleased they are already with Mike's leadership. We've had staff come to us and say, you know, Mike in his first day said the nicest things to us that we've ever heard. And that's a great way to get on the right foot as a leader for a group that really kind of flies under the radar unless stuff hits the fan. So with that, here is Mike Anderson.
Hello, everybody. As Sam said, I'm Mike Anderson, and I've met many of you already, but it's a pleasure to finally see all of you in person, and not just on YouTube. But yeah, it's nice to hear those sort of things that that they appreciated me, because from where I've been to a few different places. I'm spent most of my time down in Florida, in South Florida, for the city of Fort Lauderdale, as well as the Philadelphia area. But coming here, I've seen several plants, and they fly under the radar. However, this plant, it shouldn't. It really is, and from my heart, it really is a beautiful facility that's, you can tell, has been run fantastically. And I couldn't help but tell the guys that I work with just what a great job they've been doing. And I really think that's due to a community effort. They're running it. They're picking up that poo, but it's funded by the community, and we're all pushing forward to make sure that we're putting out a clean product into that river. And and it's just hard for me not to gush on them because they truly have been doing a fantastic job. But I'm very excited to be here to be a part of this, and I really look forward to getting us out from under the radar. I think that we've got this plant that is currently has equipment that's been online for 60 years plus, and equipment that's coming online over the next year. And the melding of those things together, I think, is something fantastic, and truly it should be celebrated. And I'd love to get the community to be aware of what they have, and just what a wonderful job that the guys are doing. So I really do look forward to working with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. You obviously know that you're replacing a wastewater Hall of Famer.
Yes, indeed.
Sid Frederickson. Is there a wastewater Hall of Fame, Wood?
Absolutely.
There should be. We should start one just for Sid.
Just
It's
sell
actually
the
the
Canton
Stall of
somewhere.
Fame.
Is it? Okay, it's the Stall of Fame. But it's great to have you here in Coeur d'Alene. And
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
yeah, thank you very much. So we will move on to the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of the consent calendar, including Resolution 17043.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
English,
Yes.
Eddinger,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Kukin.
Aye.
Motion carried. Now we are at the public comment. Anyone wishing to address the council would have 3 minutes to do so on city government business. Who would ever like to do? Come on up. You're up.
This is in reference to City Code 6.15.80, which is animals running at large. Don't look at me like that. It reads, "It is unlawful for the owner or custodian of any animal except domestic cats to allow such animal to run at large." And I would like to delete the exception for cats. I know it's difficult to contain a cat, but I don't think that that should be a reason that cat owners should not be responsible for restraining their animals. There are 4 to 5 cats that frequent my place regularly. They poop in the flower beds, they poop in the garden. My wife goes out to dig in the flower beds, and it stinks. Just yesterday, I own a duplex, and I was over there working on the sprinkler system. My tenant said that he saw a cat go into the foundation vent. So I went inside, lifted up the trap door, went down in the crawl space, and the whole place stinks like cat pee. Now, I'm not saying that's somebody's cat. Maybe it's a feral cat. I don't know. That's another issue. But it just doesn't seem right to me that people that have cats, in many cases, don't even try to keep them in their house or in their yards. They just think that cats are different. Cats are people, I guess, but they're not people. I mean, I can set a trap in the garage for a mouse and kill a mouse. I can't really do that with a cat. I do have a live trap, and I could catch a cat, but then what do I do with it? I just feel like this is something that, I mean, it's difficult for some people not to speed, but we still make rules against speeding. It's difficult for some people not to steal, but we still make rules against stealing. So it's difficult to contain a cat, but I still think we ought to make a rule against it.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a
Yeah.
couple of things. I never caught your name, sir.
Oh, sir, could you come back up for just a second? Yeah. I think Dan may have had a comment or
Oh,
question.
no, I just had a comment, but I didn't catch your name. Do you have-
Howard.
Howard,
Kuhns,
thank you.
Kuhns.
A long time ago, there was, and Woody and Ron were on council. I was not. I was in the audience. The whole subject came up about licensing cats, doing exactly what you're talking about, and I think that was probably the biggest turnout that the city council had ever had, and so you had people on both sides of the fence, and you had the cats on the fence. But it was just such a total, mess. It was a dumpster fire, I guess that's the term, and they decided not to license the cats or restrict the cats just because it would be so difficult and it would create such a major headache for everyone involved. You know, does this cat belong to someone, doesn't it? And you know this yourself, and I know this because I have a lot of feral cats in my neighborhood too, is that would just be a full-time job for someone all over the city collecting all the cats. The cats do keep the mice population down. So we would be pretty thick in mice here if we didn't have all the cats. But this issue was touched upon before, and I don't know if, Ron, Wood, you want to go back and do this again with cats?
Well, I thought we worked on something like you said about trapping, and we do have a relationship with the Humane Society out in the airport area. And then our police guys, dog catchers, what do we call them now?
Animal control.
Animal control. I'm sure they have some process for,
So if I catch a cat in a live trap, I can take it somewhere?
I'm thinking that. Yeah, I would probably check with the chief or the dog catchers, animal control.
I was under the impression that the animal shelter, which is a
don't take
no-kill
cats.
shelter, doesn't want cats.
No.
If you take it in, they won't take it. I think they're full.
Must not be paying attention then.
Well, maybe
What do
we,
you remember?
maybe we could do some homework on what other cities do. I would imagine we're not the only city that has
So
possibly a cat problem.
So even if you didn't just strike the exception, it still seems to me that there ought to be some way for me to do something about cats on my property. I mean, I'm not for cat abuse, and obviously this came up because about a month ago there was a big fiasco about a cat that had a dart in it. I'm not for animal abuse, but at the same time, it seems like I ought to be able to catch it in a trap and take it somewhere.
Right. Well, we'll do a little homework on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing, wishing to come up for public comment? Okay, if not, we will move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement?
I just have one comment. I just wanted to publicly thank the city park staff. Last Friday, before was Family Day in the Park event, we expected around 1,500 to 1,800 people. We had over 4,000 show up. So it was just a great success, and it came off without a hitch thanks to the staff at the Coeur d'Alene City Park, and I just want to publicly thank them for that on behalf of the North Idaho Family Group and the organizers that I worked with.
It was a great event. Kiki, is that planned to be annual?
It's an annual event, last day of school every year, definitely at the city park because, wow, what great service.
Yeah, it was a great event. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. I got a couple of calls, and one from County Commissioner Filios regarding our sewer fees for the new jail expansion, which they're upset about because it's going to be like $200,000 over that for the sewer fees. And they wanted to know, actually Chris wanted to know if that, if there was any way they could waive that. And since we had our discussion here about parks and the fact that when we put in a bathroom in a park, we have to pay our own sewer cap fees, and I remember talking about that. Can't we just waive our own sewer cap fees so that we could put more brick and mortar bathrooms into the park and not the porta potties? And it was a good discussion, but it kind of ended up, like Wood said at the meeting, was who else do you waive it for? So we have a jail expansion coming in. They're going to be paying $200,000 in sewer cap fees. If we waive it for them, are we going to waive it for the next time a high school is built? Are we going to waive it for, whatever else comes up? So it's kind of like we have to pay them. Everyone has to pay them, because if we waived them, it would just keep falling down and down until finally our sewer rates would go up for people and for businesses, because no one else would be paying them. So I just wanted to mention that because you might read something in the paper about it. Also, a reminder that to all our home viewer, that next meeting of the City Council will be on a Wednesday. It'll be Wednesday, July 5th, and I think you can figure out why it won't be on Tuesday. So that's just a heads up.
Any other announcements from the council? I know there's a young lady that probably missed we'll do one more little piece of business and then we'll have you come up. So I have some appointments. I have an appointment of Don Walters to the Parking Commission and Sarah Garcia to the Ignite CDA Board.
Move. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, you probably missed the public comments, so you come on up.
Thank you. Sorry about throwing off the cadence. My name is Britt Bechtel Browning, and I just wanted to talk today a little bit about what I'm branded with, Ironman. I guess first of all, we'd like to say that we're excited about the 70.3 and the addition of that race. And as the trailers roll in, we're, the whole community is excited. However, we are here to talk about the decision that impacts the whole community, which is the farewell that you're voting on tonight to the full Ironman. And I will say that we're disappointed in this decision locally, and it's reverberated across the entire Ironman community. So really what we're asking for is just some transparency in this decision, because we don't really understand. We want some support, some presentation of the factors that led to this decision, and some numbers behind that, because quite honestly, the whole community is a little bit confused and upset by this decision. And I have questions just specifically around this decision. I don't know if you're the right audience to ask. I can put them on the record and
You can sure try.
Okay.
Mr. Wilson is going to have a presentation a little later.
Okay.
And I explained this at our last council meeting. The commitment to the Ironman race amongst the city has not changed, right? We are committed to the half, we're committed to the full. I don't think there's anyone on here that changed their commitment, right? And the negotiations were between the chamber and the Ironman group. So majority of your questions probably would be answered by that body.
Okay.
So I would suggest, but you can fire away and see what we can do.
Okay. So one of the questions is really just why the full iron was moved to August. There's a lot of speculation, but nobody's really sure of the answer of that.
That would be for them.
Okay. Why it's not a pro race.
Another one for
Okay.
them. I have a feeling this might be a common answer.
Has anyone considered combining the two races? And then the final answer is, or question is, did the chamber and Ironman consult with the local community, businesses, athletes about this decision?
Okay, so again,
Yep.
those would be
Okay.
questions, and I don't know if you want to make an appointment with either Steve Wilson or whoever is the local Ironman rep, they sure can help you with those.
And
answer
I
those
just wanted to,
questions.
I was going to use my Ironman watch to time myself, but I didn't.
We've got
Oh.
go ahead right
Oh,
there.
good. So I just want to close with what hopefully I speak on behalf of other athletes here, just the benefits that we see of having the half and the full, and specifically the full Ironman here. Obviously, revenue is a huge one. I mean, everyone can argue about that, but we know that it brings in a lot of hospitality. The grocery stores are full, there are rentals. I don't think we need to argue that point, that there's a mass amount of revenue. And then also just the health benefits of an active, vibrant community of people out there training for these races and attracting like-minded people that are environmentally and health conscious. And just this kind of year-round intangible benefits. I was out cycling a couple of weeks ago, and there was a whole group
You keep going as long as you want.
of people that came out here for a clinic to see what the course is like. And there were 50 or 60 people from other parts of the country spending their money here and engaging in activities here. So we just really hope that there's some consideration made to try to lobby to keep the full Ironman here, however that might happen in negotiations.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We will move on to the General Services Committee. We have Council Bill number 171024, ordinance amendments to the noise, smoke, or odor ordinance. Mike Gridley.
It's easy for you to say, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening. We're here tonight. The legal department gets tasked with putting ordinances together or modifying existing ordinances, but it's based on complaints that have been fielded by staff. Perhaps council and the mayor have heard over the years different people make complaints about noise or excessive noise. We live in a world where it is noisy, but that's kind of normal. And as we have summertime and have events and have a lot of good things going on, there's going to be noise generated. What this is intended to address is to give the police department, our police officers, some tools so that when there is excessive, disruptive, unusual just over-the-top kind of noise that is offensive or it disturbs the peace of our citizens, that this would give them the tools to deal with that. And so the first ordinance change is under the dealing with the parking garage, 4.15.030, and it regulates or adds unreasonable and excessive noise or emissions. And I think this is aimed at people, as I understand it, some people decide that they want to, in a stationary vehicle, really accelerate their engine, rev their engine, make a lot of noise with that. And that's what they like to do, but it disturbs the other people around. So it's aimed at prohibiting that. Likewise, emissions, smoke, I guess would be the primary emission from a motor vehicle, but that's the goal of that. It also deals with unreasonable and excessively loud conduct that is offensive to essentially somebody of reasonable sensitivities. So we've tried to put in a reasonable person standard in this, and how any of our ordinances work. Ultimately, if you're charged with an ordinance, this would be an infraction for these. If you didn't think it was right, you could go to court, and we would have to prove to other members of the community, a jury or judge, that the conduct was excessive or it did justify a ticket. So, the next ordinance that we tweaked a little bit was 5.24.010, and that deals mostly with amplified music, or amplified sound. And it's unusual, unnecessary noise, excessive, disruptive, annoying, again, to a person of reasonable sensitivities. So I would say that all our police officers are reasonably sensitive, and so if they're the ones checking this out, they will, I'm sure, use discretion. Chief White is here, and he has more firsthand knowledge, I think, about the kind of conduct that we're trying to address and how his folks would enforce these ordinances. The last one is we took an ordinance that dealt with Jake brakes or compression air brakes that make a lot of noise, and added loud, unnecessary, unusual, excessive, disruptive, annoying noise to a person of reasonable sensitivities. And it's aimed at noise coming from automobiles, motorcycles, internal combustion engines, that kind of thing. And so, again, it's aimed at people, and many of us, I've experienced it downtown, where somebody on a motorcycle or a car will purposely stop and rev. It's not just starting or driving through. It's a purposely doing something to make a lot of noise. And it rattles windows, sets off burglar alarms, and annoys people. So we've been asked to bring this forward, and that's all I've got.
Questions for Mike? Ron?
Yeah, Mike, this ordinance will, special events will be exempt from this ordinance?
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that, because that's one of the things we wanted to create. Obviously, we just had Coeur d'Alene, which is a car-filled, can be noisy, but it's for a certain period of time. But it's something that was permitted by the city. Likewise, we have other events in the park or other events around the city that the city permits. We have football games. We have all kinds of things that generate noise that the community is okay with, and we would regulate that. And some of that would be regulated according to hours. If Coeur d'Alene said they wanted to run from midnight to 6 a.m., we might say, no, that's probably not the best time to do it. But they will be allowed to continue with activities like that under permit from the city.
Woody?
So Mike, let me understand this. So if people are doing this now, we don't have a rule that says you can't? Is that how I understand this?
Yeah, particularly the excessive noise and smoke from motor vehicles. We really don't have anything that addresses that. Disturbing the peace doesn't really fit this. you would need somebody to complain right away if it's disturbing the peace. And so if it's somebody living in a neighborhood and they call up, or somebody sitting downtown, they call the police say, okay, we'll be down there 5 minutes. Well, 5 minutes, they're gone. And so, again, this would allow, if a police officer is standing there, they could deal with something like that using this. So it wouldn't need a citizen to complain.
So that was my next question is, does a policeman have to be present to hear it, see it, and be bugged by it to make this work?
No, I think as long as we have something that can identify the vehicle. So if somebody calls in and says, or you stop a police officer and say, I've got the license plate of a car or motorcycle, truck, whatever it is, and they just did this, the police can then, try and find that person and probably just talk to them about that. But ultimately, they could write them a citation if they believe that's the vehicle, and the person who calls it in is willing to testify.
Whoa, seems like a little sketchy out there, go, well, so-and-so burned rubber in front of my house, and did he or didn't he? And, oh, man. So the other question is, I
Well,
remember...
if you call that in and you're willing to go to court and hold your hand up and say, this person did this in front of my house and it disrupted my peace, and the jury, your peers, or your judge says, yeah, Woody, we agree with you on that, that's good. If they don't?
I seem to remember some past, when we had noise problems, we had this little device, and we measured the decibels, and it was this device that created a lot of problems because you have to get it synced in and
You have to get
checked
it
and
calibrated. It's kind of like, be analogous to a breath meter for alcohol. If you don't have that set right and everything, then the test results aren't valid. You can't use them in court.
That isn't part of this.
No, this is a reasonable person standard, and that's kind of a lot of the conduct that we all live with is judged by negligence is, are you a reasonable person, a person of ordinary care? So that's a standard that is used in the courts, and again, it's a community standard. If a jury or judge thinks, no, I don't agree with that, then we lose. So
I like reasonable,
yeah.
but I don't know if, I'm trying to picture it working, Thanks, Mike.
We'll go down there to Dan.
I'm wondering if this just, well, you mentioned parking garage in the downtown and focused on the vehicles, but some of the other council members might have also, I got an email from a citizen who said, yeah, we're concerned about noise in our neighborhood. So I guess what I'm picturing is if there is something going on next door and they've got, like they set up the rock band and whatever, how would this apply? Would it apply? I want to make sure that if we do something, it covers the entire community and kind of affords everybody the same protection.
Right, and so I probably wasn't clear that the first ordinance I talked about, 4.15.030, is aimed at conduct in McEwen Park and parks. So, but the same type of conduct is addressed in the next two ordinances, 5.24.010 and 10.80.010. Those apply citywide. So any place within the city limits, if you're playing amplified music or music or noise too loud, excessively loud, annoying to a reasonable person, then this would come into play. And same way with the automobiles, same way with the smoke, noise, smoke, odor coming off motor vehicles.
Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this reasonable person thing is really subjective. And I remember dealing with the whole Doyle's grocery thing, and it was kind of the same deal. It was what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, and it was just so subjective that it was really hard to nail down, enforcement of the code. And that's where I have an issue with this is how, the enforcement is really going to be there only if a police officer is fortunate enough to be right next to you when the guy is in his car playing that huge bass speakers that I hate. And it's like, can't we do anything about it? Well, you have to have the police officer there first, and they all drive around in these cars that are black and white and have police in big letters on the side, so that's when the guy is going to be turning his radio down. And then calling him, and saying, oh yeah, it was this, blue beater that I saw, with the Kootenai plates that did it, and go find the guy. That seems like, again, that would be a waste of resources for cops to hunt down someone who, may or may not have done something. It just seems really subjective. And I don't know if enforcement, why would we pass a new rule if the enforcement on it is not going to be there? How will you imagine this? You described a scenario where it would be enforced, but it just seems really lucky. It's fortunate. It's kind of like in in the old Adam 12 TV show. Those guys would eat lunch somewhere that was being robbed, and you'd have to have that same kind of luck to find the guy who's abusing this ordinance. So I have a question about
I
enforcement.
think Chief White probably has some. Chief, you want to come up and talk about that?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My understanding of the questions that are being asked, I think I can answer in probably two parts. First of all, let me address the reasonableness standard. That's a standard that's commonly accepted in the legal system throughout the United States. We use it on a daily basis in our job, not only for use of force, but in other legal aspects as well. The problem with the ordinance, the way it was written previously, is it required a certain decibel level to be reached, which would require an officer to walk around with a decibel meter in their pocket or whatever, and we don't have those to that extent. And frankly, that part is difficult because, as Mr. Gridley said, they had to be calibrated and some other problems there. So the reasonableness standard is something that's commonly accepted across the U.S., and we use it daily in our current job duties. As far as the enforcement part of it, the way the code reads currently, prior to this recommended amendment, we need a complainant to call in and say, not only is this person making some loud excessive noise or something like that, but I'm also willing to go to court and testify that that particular person is making that particular noise. This ordinance, the way it's written now, as long as the officer witnesses it, then he's able to go to court and he can take that person's place as far as the reasonableness aspect. He can say that, look, I got a complaint about it and this was excessive. We hear it all the time. I'm sure everybody does driving down the street. You can hear the car for 2 blocks before you actually see it. I will tell you that it's not our intent to stand on the street corner and write people citations. That is not at all how this will be enforced from a police department perspective. Like most ordinances and most laws, our primary goal here is to educate the public. And so much like the loitering ordinance or something like that we had in McEwen Garage, the way we go about this first is educating the public on what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. So with this new change, that'd be something that we took on first. And then after that, if we had the people who are blatantly thumbing their nose at us and making noise just for the sake of making noise, then those people we can take enforcement action upon, even if we don't have a complainant that wants to come to court and testify against them. Does that answer your question?
Can you address if video documentation would be acceptable to give to an officer? How would that be handled? I guess what I'm saying is, in the Adam 12 scenario, they didn't have an iPhone where they could film the fact that there's a car being excessive regularly in front of a residential neighborhood or racing or whatever. Is that an acceptable piece of information to file the complaint with?
Well, it would certainly help. Like Mr. Gridley alluded to earlier, currently under Idaho code, I can witness you speeding down the road, and I can call in to our dispatch and tell our central dispatch that I witnessed this vehicle speeding, and if an officer's in the area, I'm willing to sign a complaint. And under those circumstances, we can stop you and issue a complaint on the complainant's behalf. You can get a ticket for that. This wouldn't be unlike that. So if someone is willing to go to court and they have the documented evidence that they can show us, and they're willing, because we didn't personally witness it, they did instead. If they're willing to go to court and do that piece, that's certainly a method by which we can do this also. A lot of times when we get complaints, it's the repeated complaints where someone will say, every day between noon and 4 o'clock, this group of kids is down there with the noise, and I go down there and I yell at them, and they run off, and they come back and do it again. They drive back the next day, and, you know, it happens not regularly enough for us to be down there and just kind of sit and wait for the kids to show up, but it's infrequent enough that if we happen to be in that area and we witness that, then we can stop and educate them the first time, and if it continues, then we can take enforcement action. This amendment allows us to do that.
Comment on your question that it gets back to proof. So if you had a video or you had an audio recording of something, if a ticket's issued, it would then go to our prosecutor's office. They would look at it and say, can we go forward with this, or is this too weak of evidence? So there's kind of a screening process, but any evidence could be, or anything like that could be evidence that would help support a case. But it would primarily be an eyewitness. That would be the best evidence.
Any other questions? Dan?
Yes, just to clarify with the chief, some years ago, I was on the council before, and we had a proposed ordinance that was going to require police to basically regulate the thong bikinis on the beach, and we voted that down. And I remember Chief Skates being very thankful that we did, because that, and it sounds like, I mean, so I guess I want to know, are you supportive of this and feel like it's a reasonable use of our resources?
Thongs on the beach?
No,
I don't think I should comment on the thong on the beach.
I'll look into that for you.
Yeah, you missed quite a, yeah.
This would certainly give us another tool, primarily to educate, but then for the people, the scofflaws who were unwilling to comply and are blatantly thumbing their nose at the peaceful community, if you will, then it gives us a tool to take action. I will tell you that based on my experience, this is something that will be very rarely applied. However, it is always nice to have that tool in your toolbox for the day that you need it.
So hopefully if we pass it and advertise it and put it out there, it can be a prevention kind of a tool. So.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Ron?
Is this going to be a certain time of day, like morning, afternoon, or night? It's just any time?
Right, anytime. Unless by permission through the city for an event or something.
Kiki, do you have another question?
I just had a comment when this came up at General Services. We had talked a little bit about the fact that this being a vacation town, there's a lot of, say, motorcycle clubs that come to town and things like that. And so my request was just to ask our successful social media folks and your department to make our hoteliers and those organizations, to the best of our ability, aware so that we don't have folks innocently breaking the law that's new to them.
Dan?
Well, if there's no more discussion, I'm good for a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I would make a motion to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill number 17-1024 once by title only.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Dan?
Mr. Mayor, I'll be opposing this. I just think we have too many rules already. This is yet another one. Doesn't seem like it's going to be applied, rarely applied, and people have a right to be loud and obnoxious. I have a right to go somewhere else. I mean, that's fine by me.
Any other discussion? Woody?
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines that you talked about, Gook, but after the chief gets up there and tells you it's a tool and they're not out there just to spank people, I think we need to at least let them give it a shot if it's something that can make things more peaceful. Last thing I want to do is another law, another rule telling people what you can and can't do. I'm with you on that. But I think when the chief gets up there and says this is a tool we need to do this job, I'm going to support that.
And just my observation on that is I know his duty is to uphold the law and to, peace officer is what he is. But I think our job is to kind of throttle that back a little bit and decide where does individual rights and responsibilities take over, and where do we keep creating rules to keep, saying this, and this, and put everyone in a box, which is, we're going to be talking about alcohol in a little bit, and I know where the chief stands on that. And so it's going to be kind of the same thing. Do we Do we do that? Do we throttle it back? Do we create another rule? I just don't, especially if it was something that they were going to actively enforce. There was cases of where, you know, hey, we had this guy and we had him and we nailed him, and then, you know, we could have done something, but instead he went out and did this. Then it's like, yeah, let's go ahead and work on that. But right now it's more hypothetical. The whole reasonable person thing is also just, that always comes into doubt for me. It becomes very subjective. Most of our laws are very objective. So there you go.
Any other discussion? Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill 17-1024, an ordinance of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, amending sections 4.15.040, 5.24.010, and 5.24030I, Coeur d'Alene Municipal Code, regulating the creation of noise and emission of smoke and odors, retitling Coeur d'Alene Municipal Code Chapter 10.80, air compression brakes, as Chapter 10.80, additional prohibited conduct, amending Section 10.80.010 of the Coeur d'Alene Municipal Code to include noise and odor and smoke regulations, providing for the repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for the publication of a summary, and providing for an effective date.
Roll call, please.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
No.
English?
Yes.
Motion carried. We were looking for a motion on the second portion of this.
I move to adopt Council Bill 17-1024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
No.
English?
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Mike and Chief. We will move on to Out of the Shadows Theater Grant. We have Sam Taylor that's going to give us a presentation on that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, I want to say how happy I am that we have such a great audience here tonight for this issue. It's really exciting that folks are here to listen to things regarding arts in our community, so very excited about that. Tonight before you is a consideration of a grant recommended by the Arts Commission of $5,000 to the nonprofit Out of the Shadows Theater. This is a program in which disabled adults and youth are able to participate in a local stage play. And it's hard to describe. I wish I had the video, but basically they have shadow actors that assist them. They either are behind them to provide support, to read dialogue, or to show them where their cues are, or really just to help them in general. It's a pretty powerful thing to see that and see how these folks get to participate in something they otherwise maybe would not have been able to. Last year, during, I guess right after the Arts Commission had recommended its budget and council had kind of solidified it, Out of the Shadows Theater did come to the Arts Commission and presented and requested a grant, but it was a little bit too late in the process. So the Arts Commission asked them to come back this year and make the request again. And Out of the Shadows Theater did exactly what was asked of them. They did come to the Arts Commission and made a presentation. In the meantime, the Arts Commission had also worked on some updates to the art policy as well as the art ordinance. As part of the update to the art policy, it included a new community art organization grant program in which we've expanded what our art funding can be used for. Previously, it was only for physical sculptures and art, paintings, stuff like that. That's where we see a lot of the 149 pieces of art throughout our community. The policy update, the ordinance update, expanded that to all types of art, including performing arts as well as support for arts education. So that's allowed this organization to be supported this year, but part of that new grant program is an RFP process. That process was intended to be started with the new fiscal year, so we were hoping to get the RFP process created now and then begin advertising for it now so that we could award these grants come the new fiscal year on October 1st. So we're a little bit out of when they would come. They also need this funding now because they're already incurring expenses coming to their show. So we're asking for this funding in this fiscal year, not the next. Their full budget, we had some follow-up because we had some council questions. Their full budget for this production is about $9,500. They have one sponsor so far, STCU, for $1,000. And because this production was so popular last year, they actually had 2 fully sold-out shows at the Kroc Center. They've included a third show That has increased the cost of all their royalties and licensing, as well as their venue rental. It might surprise folks to realize that the Kroc rental is more than $3,000 for this production, just for that portion of it. It doesn't include the programs, the licensing of the production, et cetera, et cetera. So they do have some sizable costs, and thus the recommendation from the Arts Commission for the $5,000 grant. The Arts Commission fully recognizes that they are to, in the future, work through an RFP process for this grant program. They very much recognize that. They wanted me to make sure you knew that they recognized that, but that this was sort of a unique circumstance because of the timing, because we're kind of in that limbo period. So with that, I stand for any questions. I'm happy to answer what I can.
Wood.
So they've been doing this for a few years without the city's money, right? Without grant money,
Last year was the first year.
first year.
Correct.
And then RFP will do what? So they aren't in line every year. Once you start getting it, you get it every year? No.
No. So every year there would be a request for a proposal process that any organization that would like to receive a community art organization grant would need to apply. And they would have to do that each year.
Okay, so under this RFP, that is directed at performing arts.
It's really directed at any community art organization that would seek support from the Arts Commission in the city. So it's likely to be probably applied for from performing arts organizations as well as arts education organizations.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Sam? Amy?
I don't have a question, but I just have a statement as the Arts Commission liaison. There was plenty of discussion surrounding this, and I'm appreciative that it's in front of us tonight because they did recognize this as an unusual request. However, it was voted on at Arts Commission and it passed unanimously. So.
Okay. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to see this issue brought up before us because this is our first time that our Arts Commission is going to be supporting performing arts, which is something that I'm very much in favor of. And it kind of frustrates me because this is just awkward and wrong. I'm not talking about the Out of Shadows Theater. They just happen to get caught up here. But there were no RFPs, I think, sends a terrible message to all the arts community, performing arts community, that why weren't they asked? I mean, they're going to be asking this. We have so many great performing arts entities in this city who have contacted me and asking, you know, the state does this and the city does art. Why doesn't the city do performing art? Performing art is just art, just like sculpture. We do a lot of sculpture. Why can't we do performing arts? And so our very first one is almost like a backroom deal. It's almost like, boy, they got in there and they got it set and they got a nice grant. I got to tell you, we used to run a theater for 5 years. And if you go to a performing arts event and you read the program, you find out what the sponsorships are in the back. They're very transparent about that. Usually $1,000 buys you sponsorship of the show, and you can see that STSU, or the credit union, according to what you said, gave them $1,000. That's usually what you expect. $1,000 buys you sponsorship of the show. So for $5,000, we could have given money to Lake City Playhouse and to Summer Theater and to Opera Plus and to the Coeur d'Alene Symphony. We could have spread that out a lot, but instead, it's like these people who are already lined up. And I think the message that this sends to the performing arts community is, you know, it taints it. It's not about Out of the Shadows. It's about a process that when we do anything here, when we give out a grant to do a sculpture, we do an RFP. When we hire someone to put asphalt down on the road, we do an RFP. We're constantly making sure that we aren't playing favorites and that we're not going to be accused of doing a backroom deal or having our pals first in line anywhere. We don't want to see that at all. And especially it concerns me because you said that they're counting on this. So it's almost like there was a promise made. And that just, it really upsets me that all this stuff has to have that baggage attached to it, when what I really wanted to do with this was show that we do support performing arts. And we did have an opportunity here for all these arts organizations, too many to count, who could have done an RFP and who could have gotten a sponsorship, but no, instead we're giving money to these guys who, according to the minutes of the Art Commission meeting, they were, quote, grandfathered in. And I don't know what that means. I've read the ethics manuals, and I don't know what it means to grandfather someone in. So, Mr. Mayor, I have to not oppose this, but what I would recommend, and I don't think it'll go anywhere, but I think we need to send this back out to RFP. I think we need to have them go through the process that everyone else goes through to make sure that we're not playing favorites.
So, just a second. So did you want to make a motion to that effect?
I want to hear what Amy has to say.
Okay,
Well,
go ahead, Amy.
Dan, with all due respect, I do take exception to the backroom deal comment. I don't think that's respectful of all of our Arts Commission, and it is before us tonight to have a very open discussion with nearly a full room. So I think that's a strong accusation and strong comment directed at a vivacious group of volunteers working to better the city.
I have the minutes here, and you were there. And so, the new ordinance says that people have to go through the RFP process. Chairman Drake will talk to Mr. Taylor about it and said, this one case, they may be able to grandfather them in. Again, it's about the rules. And earlier in the same meeting, they talked about the election of a new chairman. Chairman Drake said the bylaws of the commission state that a new chairman and vice chairman must be elected every 2 years, but it hasn't been regularly enforced. So again, we come down to a question of, we have rules in this city, and everyone up here swore an oath to uphold those rules, but apparently we don't need to enforce them. So I would say, in this case, we need to enforce the rules. This has to go out to an RFP. We have to tell the arts community that we're going to be fair.
Further discussion? Dan?
I'm not sure who could clarify. Actually, I'm finding myself in quite a bit of Dan's comments about the process, but normally for an RFP, to me, it seems like this is a very small amount that normally you wouldn't go out to an RFP. Is this a unique, or am I wrong on that? What's the normal threshold?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. So just to be clear, I want to clarify too, I apologize if I said this, I don't recall saying it. I don't believe they're counting on this funding, but I think they would very much appreciate it. They did come make a request at a public meeting. The Arts Commission meetings are public. We do put the agendas online. The media and the public are able to see those. So I don't think it's been secret. I do want to make sure that's very clear. As to the grant process, so this is going to be our very first year, and we have a limited amount of money within the Public Art Fund really to fund that. So I believe this next year, we're going to have approximately $32,000 in the budget, should council approve that later in the year, prior to October 1st, for this grant program. So we would dole out that total $32,000 to whatever organization makes a request. There is a subcommittee right now in the Arts Commission that's working to develop the RFP process. And so they're working to structure it to make sure that it is fair, that they ask the right questions of these organizations so that they can make a really strong recommendation to council for you to approve any future contract with that organization for that grant. I would say that it's a philosophical question as to whether or not this is too much money or not. It's also up to the council as to whether 5,000 is the appropriate number or more. Arts Commission actually initially, their first motion was 10,000. Which is actually more than the production's worth. But you could also make a motion for less funding if that's what you feel is appropriate in terms of sponsorship. It really is a philosophical issue. But we are also in a really a kind of a limbo period where the RFP process is not ready. The RFP process is really intended, the council only a few meetings ago approved that policy update. So the commission does need time to get that in place. And so our intent was to have it ready later in the summer so we can start accepting applications for the next fiscal year. This, however, this request is for this fiscal year. So on one hand, it's yes, we have that policy in place now, but our intent really was to get it up and running by October 1st, to award those first grants under that new policy October 1st. And so I would say from a staff perspective, this is a tough one. It's a unique circumstance, and staff would recommend approval of this because we are in that limbo period.
Well, to clarify, for the RFP process, are you anticipating that they could end up giving just one group the full 32,000, or will there be some kind of limits for the maximum grant is X amount?
I apologize, I do not know the answer to that. I'm not part of that subcommittee. So our Arts Commission has many subcommittees. They work very hard on a volunteer basis to do that work, and they're still doing it. So I don't know what they've fashioned so far.
Okay, and just, I guess one more clarification is, if there was some kind of an RFP process on this, I mean, is it a deal killer for this for this specific request?
They've indicated that if they have to hold off, they could be funded in the next fiscal year. Just obviously, their budget will be tight, making expenditures now for this production. So they've indicated that they could wait until sometime in early October, if necessary.
Dan?
Thank you. And I just wanted to address Dan English's thoughts on this. Yeah, the funding for a performing arts thing is kind of, it's as fun as you want to make it. So if you want to give $1,000 for me to put on a show, I can put on a show. You give me $20,000, I'll still put on the show, I'll just spend more money. And that's kind of the way it works in performing arts. We would get grants on things to run shows, and it really didn't affect the budget because the budget is kind of fixed. Their budget, $9,500, that makes sense. That's actually kind of steep because croc rentals are really high. I hear that a lot. But that's generally, if you give them the $30,000, yeah, they'd still put on the show. It would just be much more spectacular. So we have to, I guess, moving forward, I would love to say to the Arts Commission that I would prefer to have more grants, smaller grants, so that they could spread them out. They don't need to go to the whole, fund a whole show. You just need to go ahead and be a sponsor. Again, the back of the program tells you exactly what they want. They'll tell you what the different levels of funding are. Generally, $1,000 will get you a show sponsorship. You want to do all the whole summer theater season, you give them $4,000, you can sponsor every single show. And a lot of the organizations work like that.
Any other questions? What?
You guys brought up some interesting stuff. I'd like, Ames, what's your perspective? You probably understand where he's coming from on that kind of hurry up thing. It was, 2 meetings ago, and these guys come in. Where's you at on that?
I completely understand most of Dan's points, both Dan's. It's, like Sam said, it's an awkward period of time yet. The subcommittee has not had time to formulate the RFP process yet. This organization has proposed isn't the right word, come to us twice for funding. They've done what we've requested them to do, come back earlier next year. It's just an awkward timing issue. It's an exception. I am happy that it's here for open discussion as long as we're respectful and understanding of one another. And I do appreciate the fact that this is odd, So I don't disagree with that. However, there's nothing secret about it. So that's my thoughts.
Any other questions for Sam? Kiki?
Sam, at Arts, or maybe this is for Amy as well, was there a discussion about any other performing arts organizations that could be in this same limbo period? In other words, it's Coeur d'Alene Summer Theater is out there right now and doing shows. Have there been any discussions about them being able to ask for money before the RFP is ready? How did the commission deal with that issue?
There has not been any specific discussion about those other organizations now, and I would say that staff especially has not been approached by any of those other organizations yet. We have had, I apologize, it was maybe the opera or one of the choruses did contact me recently when they learned of the new policy and just asked to be basically placed on our list. So when we do the RFP process, they really want to participate. But no one has specifically said they would like to have funding in this fiscal year. So it seems like the arts community at least is aware that this will be coming in the future.
Other questions for Sam? So if there are no other questions, we would be looking to see what council's desire was.
I'd make a motion to approve a performing arts grant in the current fiscal year for Out of the Shadows Theater in the amount of $5,000.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
So, Dan. Again, Mr. Mayor, this is nothing to do with the Out of the Shadows Theater. We're the organization. I've did some homework on them. Outstanding. I mean, I have nothing to complain about with them. It's a fun show. They did a great job last year. They're going to do a great job this year. It's just about the process, and I want to ensure, because I push this big time, to make sure that all these performing arts people would be able to celebrate art the same way we've celebrated sculpture and visual arts. Performing arts is part of that. I just would like to start it off on a good foot. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I just feel like I'm a huge supporter of the performing arts as well. I just wonder, I can't help but wonder out loud if the other folks who had called to ask questions had an inkling that they could ask for money now, they probably would have. That's just kind of the nature of the nonprofit world. So that gives me a little bit of concern about the process as well.
Dan?
Well, this is a tough one, but I think I'm going to have to come down on respecting the process, nothing to do with the group or anything. I've also been involved in a lot of nonprofits and grants, and one of the facts of life is that there are timelines and guidelines, and sometimes you fall in it and sometimes you don't. And again, nothing to do with the worthiness of the cause, but this is a case where I just have to, I will vote against this because of the process, so.
Any other discussion?
Request a roll call vote.
Roll call, please, Renata. Your request is granted.
Right. Miller,
No.
English,
No.
McEvers,
I want to abstain. Oh, sorry. I learned that from you, Ron. Yeah.
You got to be here longer.
Yeah. No.
Eddinger,
Yes.
Yes.
Evans, Gookin,
No.
So motion fails. Is that right, Renata? 2-4. Okay, motion fails. Thank you, Sam. So we'll move on to Council Bill number 17-1025, approval of amendments to Municipal Code Chapter 5-08-160A entitled Alcohol Beverage Catering Permits. Renata, that doesn't look like Renata. Looks like Jim.
Mr. Hammond has volunteered to step up first.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The reason that I am standing here, and I know you're disappointed that it's not Renata, is that Renata was out of town while this whole activity occurred, so that's why I'm filling in. The action before you on this is really very short, sweet, and simple. It's not about open container laws all around town. It's only about sampling of alcoholic beverages at special events. And this is before you because for the second year in a row, the vendors at the farmers market have asked that they be allowed to provide samples of their beverage to people who are interested in purchasing their beverage. It will conform to state law, which says when this happens, any consumption of alcohol must be within a contained area, so they will have to provide a contained area to do this. Actually, the samples come in these very small cups, so I think if you tried to walk out of the area, you'd spill what little you get anyway, so I don't think that's really an issue. And it says that you must consume your 1.5 ounces within this contained area. Well, if you're doing more than 1 sip or 2 on that, you're really a very careful consumer of the beverage. And quite simply, that's the ordinance that is before you, Your Honor.
Questions for Jim? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I saw General Services where this was discussed. It's delightful when things go sideways. But I see that and it was for good reason, too. I mean, I totally agreed. I thought it was a great discussion, and it's a discussion we do need to have. But I think just for the specific issue, for what we're talking about, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think, even the PD, which is normally, they're the ones who want to clamp down on booze out in the streets, but I think for this, it makes total sense for someone, if you're going to be selling wine at a street fair, gosh, give away the free samples. And I know you and I would stand there for a long time and test everything, and that's what it's all about. So I'm in favor of this. I think it's good. I think they did a good job codifying the whole thing. I don't have any problems with that. But the rest of the discussion was about all these exceptions, and I think we do need to, at some point in the future, address that. But just to focus on what's here tonight, which is just allowing these guys to have their little area, which is going to be permitted and all that. That sounds great.
Other questions? Woody?
So this is beer and wine, no hard alcohol,
That is correct.
and that covers everything, because 1.5 ounces is normally a good-sized shot. Couple shots,
That's
you're
why
on your
this
way.
is not hard liquor. This is only beer and wine.
Beer and wine. And could this be also done if they move the if they move the street fair into the parks? Same idea, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Other questions for Jim?
This affects the parks ordinance?
No, sorry, Mr. Hammond, I need to correct you on that one. This one is only for public rights-of-ways and sidewalks. The parks is a separate chapter of the code. Sorry.
And herein,
Well, it's a good thing we're both here.
Quick question, sorry, Jim.
my comment was I was one of the sideways on this one, and that kind of illustrates the reason I was, is that there's this overlay of 10 exceptions to alcohol use within an ordinance for certain city streets and sidewalks, but then there's a whole nother section that applies to parks, but it doesn't apply to the parks uniformly. And my thought is, I think that this particular ordinance should move forward. It makes sense, but I would like to, at a later date, just maybe let staff know that I think it's time to review these ordinances. We've gotten so many conflicts. I feel like we're potentially entrapping people. We have conflicts with border communities. We're kind of penalizing a non-problem causing sector. And I don't know what the business community or the residents of the area think about this. It's not been visited for a long time. So that was my comment to, I'd like to maybe somewhere in the future see a workshop on this where we get these parties together and review the whole issue of the overlying conflicting ordinances here.
Other questions for Jim? So we'll be looking for council action if there are no other.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we dispense with the rule and read Council Bill number 17-1025 by title only.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
I was just thinking back to, what hasn't been that long that we've actually been doing liquor in the parks, on the sidewalks. It started, I think, when the bars wanted to set up outside on the sidewalks, and we had to go through all that. They had to serve in plastic. We didn't want glassware staying inside the fences. And then I think a few years later, we finally, recently, just opened up the parks to where that place down there on McEwen that has a beer and wine license can have a contained area in the park. And we haven't been doing it that long. This has been very conservative compared to, say, Post Falls, who's been doing it for years and years. So I think sometimes we step lightly, and again, having grown up with all the old timers, there was no movement. And Ron, I respect your past on this. It hasn't been your favorite subject, right? Just kind of going back to the past, so.
Why did you say old timer and then you immediately went to Ron?
Well, old timer, people that aren't here anymore,
Okay.
that I was raised with, and Ron's
Okay.
the grandfather now, so I get it, I get it. But it does need to be sort of addressed on a bigger issue, because like you say, it's all getting pieced together now.
And I do think that, with all respect to old timers, Ron and I had this conversation, I'll share briefly, that 40 years ago, microbreweries didn't exist, and we had bars that opened at 6 a.m. because the guys getting off the night shift at Potlatch wanted to have a beer in the morning at the end of their shift. So our community and its industry and the use of adult beverages has changed. And I guess that's more the nature of the way I'd like to look at how these move us forward.
Good one.
Any other discussion? Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill 17-1025, an ordinance amending Section 5.08.160 of the Municipal Code of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho, entitled Beer, Wine, and Liquor Prohibitions Within the City Exceptions, providing for a repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing severability, providing for the publication of a summary, and providing an effective date.
Roll call, please.
Eddinger?
No.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes?
McEvers?
God, yes.
Gookin?
God, yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Move to adopt Council Bill 171025.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Eddinger.
No.
Evans.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
McEvers.
Yes.
Gookin.
Yeah.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Mr. Mayor, as long as the taste is good in our mouth, I would like to make a motion to direct staff to arrange a workshop where we can discuss all our alcohol rules and exceptions and have a little presentation as to what's what and do a real nice
Wine tasting with it?
wine tasting along with, no, strike that part. Just go ahead and have a discussion, because it seems like it's a topic that I know you want to discuss, and I think it would be good just to be refreshed on where we are, hear from police, talk about open containers, talk about the exceptions. Let's go forward
And
with that.
find a way to get some input from the business community that it affects, and the residents. So I think that's really, it's important to just take a chance to talk about it and review where we're at.
Is that a second?
Do we
Oh,
need,
and that's a
can we
second.
just direct staff, Renata, or would you like a vote on that? Or can we just direct staff to?
If you would like to direct staff, it's just always good to give staff good information on what you're looking for.
Okay, and then time frame. I like to put a time frame to it to see when, so we're at the 20th of June right now. They're obviously pretty busy. You might get a little frown if you said by July 5th.
No.
So,
I think we can take our time on this because we got a lot of stuff
In
going
the
on.
early fall,
Yeah.
in September.
After the remodel, after some,
Yeah, so sometimes this fall, if we could come back and have a council workshop on that. Got that, Jim?
Is that a good enough time frame for you?
I have a churner. Now, you sure you don't want samples?
We'll see.
Samples will be taken before and after.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your work on that. We'll move on to other business. We have resolution number 17044, approval of amendments to the host venue agreement with World Triathlon Corporation and the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce. We have Steve Wilson, President and CEO of the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce, with us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. As Mr. Mayor said, I'm Steve Wilson. I'm the president of the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce. After thoughtful consideration, the Chamber and WTC Ironman have come to a mutual agreement amending our current contract for future Ironman races here in Coeur d'Alene. We firmly believe that this new agreement is a win-win agreement for all key partners. The fiscal responsibility of the Chamber is greatly reduced. The business interruption to downtown merchants greatly reduced. The strain on city services and volunteer needs are greatly reduced. Both WTC and Coeur d'Alene retain our earned Ironman brand equity. We continue to have a first-class major event in June, and we continue to build on our great relationship with WTC. In short, we are seeking council support in providing host city services for the June 70.3 only, services that you have historically been providing. This agreement covers the years of 2018, 19, and 2020. Again, this agreement is for the 70.3 only, as the agreement eliminates the August 140.6 after this year. The mechanism to do so is to authorize the appropriate city signature to the amended contracts you have been provided. And I'll stand for any questions and try to answer those
Questions for Steve?
as
Ron?
they come up.
Yeah, Steve, the mayor, the city council had nothing to do with the change, correct? I mean, we're here to approve what we've approved in the past and approve what you're asking us to do. But we had nothing to do with doing any of the changing, correct?
Ron, I think that would be a correct statement. We, being the Coeur d'Alene Chamber, there are three signatories to the contract. They are the city to provide host services, the chamber responsible for funding, and WTC as the operator of the event. The agreement that I bring before you today is between all three of us, brought to you by WTC and the Chamber of Commerce, requesting that you provide host city services for the 70.3. in June and not the 140.6 in August. That's correct.
So, I guess what I'm kind of, in a way, saying in a little bit of a way, and that, you know, the billboard is a bunch of crap.
Here.
Don't hold back, Ron.
I didn't.
No, you didn't. Good.
You kept it PG.
But the billboard was wrong, what it stated, because like the mayor said, that we, the mayor and the council, have always agreed with what the chamber and the other groups have wanted to do. And we've supported Ironman all these years. And then for somebody to come out and put up on a billboard what they put up, to my thinking is a bunch of crap, be honest with you.
Other questions? Dan?
At least a couple of the questions we had earlier that sound legitimate, that, and I'm not sure what the answer is. Why did you pick the half over the full, and why, if you have two different date options, why did you stay with June rather than August?
I think it's important for council and the community to fully understand that race, WTC Ironman, owns and operates the race for profit. They bring it to communities that are willing to sponsor. In other words, someone within a community needs to put up some front money. Not atypical across the country, not atypical for lots of other events, rock and roll marathons, challenge Ironmans, Muddy Miles, etc. All carry sponsorship fees. The Chamber of Commerce was the organization that was asked to step in 15 or 13, 14 years ago and be that entity. And we have done so gratefully with some partners. And it is in negotiations back and forth with those entities. The sponsor, responsible for raising the money, and the operator, responsible for putting on the races and trying to make some profit out of those. Our partners in this are the Downtown Association, the CVB, the tourism industry, and the resort. And in analyzing all options that were discussed privately, it appeared very apparent that the success of the 70.3 in June was a better time, a better race for all parties concerned. And so that's why the settlement on that particular race, the 140, quite honestly, has had declining participation over the last several years. And the move by the Chamber and WTC in our negotiations a couple of years ago was an attempt to adjust that race to market conditions. And those market conditions suggested to WTC that moving that race to August would be better for attendance because the water would be warmer. That hadn't worked out that way. Attendance actually declined the first year that that race moved to August. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yep, thanks.
Amy?
Steve, can you help the audience and me by explaining why it was presented to the community that August 2017 would be the last Ironman when it hadn't been here yet? You know, we had not cast our vote, but it's being presented to the community through social outlets, through the media, that it's final. So I think there's a lot of confusion about that. I've been getting a lot of calls and emails, and I keep saying, come tonight, come talk to us. There's going to be a vote tonight. So I'm confused on why it was presented that way, which I found very misleading.
All I can tell you is the Chamber of Commerce never presented any such information to the community that way.
Okay.
Other questions? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was here when we did a renewal on the contract. I think it was 2012. And at the time, and a lot of people don't know this, but at the time, there was a lot of concern that Ironman wasn't going to renew their contract. that 2012 was going to be the last year of the Ironman race. And a lot of people in City Hall and elsewhere hustled to try to get it to continue, and the athletes were actually the ones who really kind of pushed it over the top and caused them to go ahead and stick around. But I remember at that time, I read the contract. It seemed to me to be rather egregious that you had the Ironman organization, and originally they were private. They were like the Stark Corporation or something. And then the WTC bought them, and they became a for-profit corporation. And what I had heard, what the rumor was spreading around City Hall, was that we were too small, that their new for-profit model was that they weren't going to hold an Ironman race in any city unless it had a population of at least 1 million people. And we're not there, thank God. But a lot of people hustled, and a lot of the athletes put a lot of pressure on, and the race continued, and it was marvelously successful. It would sell out within a couple of days after the race was over. But I read your contract, and I remember talking to you about the chamber, and I'm like, holy cow, this thing is egregious. Here we have this international corporation that's for-profit, that puts on these races, that wants to go to million population cities, and they were making you pay for their security and their insurance and to put up people in hotel rooms. And you're our Coeur d'Alene chamber, and here you were shouldering a burden that I had heard it was upwards of $900,000 over the years that you guys paid so that a for-profit corporation could come here and put on a race. And the race is good. I'm not, you know, I love the Ironman race, but it just seemed to be such a burden. So the question is, now that it's, I think, become apparent to me that the corporation doesn't want to be here because they're not making enough money on the big race. So they're going to give us the crumbs. They're going to give us the half Ironman race, which is still a decent race. I mean, I couldn't run it. I admire people who do. But you're still going to be paying $25,000. So the question to you as a nonprofit who's paying money to a for-profit corporation is, are you going to be reaping the rewards for that down the road?
You quit at the wrong time.
That never happens.
I was expecting more. Let me try to answer that question a couple ways. First of all, it is what the Chamber of Commerce is supposed to do in some respects. A Chamber of Commerce is an organization comprised, in our case, of 1,100 members, business members. We're supposed to be an advocate for increased in business, increased tourism. Bringing major event to a community at the time was good for business. We had the full support of a lot of businesses, including almost all of those in the tourism industry, and the time was right to introduce Coeur d'Alene to the world, and we did. And our board gratefully accepted that responsibility. Was it a big number? Yes, sir. For a small nonprofit organization, it was. I'm proud to say that very little of our membership's dues went to pay that. It took some negotiations with some partners that I referred to in order to make it happen. It's a very complicated funding mechanism that we've put together. Our name is on it, but behind the scenes, we have been able to raise that money. So at the time, we did that not without serious consideration of our board, trust me. You know, sitting on a board of directors that has responsibility to the tune of nearly 6 figures a year was a tough decision, particularly when you're looking at committing multiple years. Each contract that we signed was a 5-year deal. I would say in WTC's defense that I've worked with them very closely for the last several years, and I don't find them to be a cold, callous, big for-profit company. The individuals that we've been negotiating with are Coeur d'Alene boys. They've lived here, they grow up here. Several of them currently still spend a great deal of time here. They have been very flexible in helping us navigate this change. 28 pages of a contract that are done by a major corporation in Florida. It can be rather erroneous, yes. Egregious, maybe. We did have our attorneys look at it, and your attorneys looked at it, and we knew what we entered into when we did, and we feel good about 18, 19, and 20. Quite honestly, I think it's something to consider that we're looking forward to is a longer-term relationship with WTC. Many of you may have read that on June 2nd, WTC bought Rock and Roll Marathon, a branded world-class event. Is there a possibility that the Chamber of Commerce or another entity in Coeur d'Alene could at a future time enter into an agreement with WTC to bring one of those here? It's very possible as long as we keep the door open, and we believe this agreement keeps that door open. Also keeps the door open for future changes in the industry. Does the 140 come back at some point? Is there another race that comes back? WTC is a big, expanding, growing company. Lots of possibilities, and we remain open to all of them.
And I appreciate that, and I hope that this does open the door to more opportunities. And I didn't mean to imply that they were evil. They're for profit. They're capitalists. Capitalism is an amoral system, and if profits are what they're about, then that's what they're about. And I
Was
just
there a
want
movie that said greed is good? Who was that?
I don't know. That was a different decade. We're in a weirdo decade right now. and
I'm
not
an
gonna
old guy.
comment
I
on
remember that decade.
But I do hope, knowing, trusting your wisdom and the wisdom especially of the community and business leaders who make up your board, moving forward, I think that would be a good move. I know you can't control them. We all have what we would really want. And sometimes you can't get that, especially when you're working with a company that's looking at a bottom line and trying to make shareholders happy. That can't always be what we want. Thank you.
Other questions for Steve? Kiki?
I just had two things I wanted to clarify. The Downtown Association and the Convention and Visitors Bureau were both partners? Or?
Yes, our funding, they're part
Partners.
of our funding partner base. That is correct.
So was their membership surveyed and their input taken into consideration in this negotiation piece?
Yes and no. I'm not sure I understand their bylaws 100%. I know our bylaws. We did not survey our membership. Our board of directors has the authorization and has the responsibility to conduct the business of the Chamber of Commerce. Our board voted unanimously in support of this. I do know that both the Downtown Association and the CVB boards voted in support as well.
Thank you. And my other thing was, does the city have the city as an entity in its partnership, am I clear to understand that what is before us is to say yes or no to providing services to whatever race the chamber as the sponsor and WTC have negotiated to move forward with?
Yes and no. The contract, the motion before you, or the request before you, is to provide host city services as outlined in a contract specifically for the June 70.3, not any race, but the June 70.3 for the years 18, 19, and 20. Technically, that's an amendment to the contract that Councilman Gookin referred to, an existing contract that runs those 3-year period. So rather than extend that period, we've negotiated a 3-year deal. At the end of 2020, at the end of June 2020, there could be other options that would talk about other races, other dates. The lady in the audience suggested that potentially both races could be run on the same day. WTC operates that, has experimented with that in a couple of cities. It's not before us today. That was an option that was discussed, but not, quote, viable today.
Any other questions for Steve? Woody?
Just one more. So the Ironman people who do the race, the athletes, the people that pay the money, I'm getting the feeling that what showed up tonight, that they're feeling a little out of the loop, And I guess it sounds like they don't really have much to say about it because it's basically economics. Would you elaborate on that a little?
The WTC races are a product that is offered in the marketplace by WTC. So to the extent that those in the audience have purchased that product, obviously they have a vested interest in that product. If you were to buy an electric razor from Norelco, I doubt that you'd have a whole lot of input you'd have a choice of either purchasing the Norelco razor or another brand, and probably not have a whole lot to do with whether that razor was made out of titanium or plastic. And that's kind of the way WTC is. They're in the business and they operate races that are products that people purchase.
Well, that's an interesting, thank you. Very
Ron.
good.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve Resolution 17-044.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Amy?
So tonight, I'm going to vote from my heart. My vote is based on what I truly believe is best for our community. I've had the opportunity to be an Ironman volunteer captain for over 11 years, and I won Captain of the Year in what I think was 2005. I didn't dig deep. It could have been 2004. I visited other Ironman events throughout the year, which did not even come close to comparing to ours. I've had the honor of crossing the coveted finish line and being called an Ironman. I know firsthand what it requires from you as an athlete, the level of support needed from family and friends, and most importantly, from our beloved community. Our amazing citizens have helped thousands of athletes accomplish one of the biggest goals of their lives. Hotels and businesses welcome them and their families to town by hanging banners and signs in their storefronts. Ironman flags decorate our streets, and the economic impact is substantial. The demonstration and adoption of healthy lifestyles and goal setting is contagious. But for me, the biggest impact on our community is the fact that Ironman unites us all and sets us apart and above other communities. I believe this decision should have great consideration. I do not believe the community realized they would have an opportunity to share their thoughts with us since it was presented as being final. Without hearing from them and giving them an opportunity to share their thoughts, I cannot vote to support the amendment of this contract.
That's not. Okay, any other discussion on that? Woody?
I've been working for Ironman for, I don't know, 14, 13 years. So I really am in no position to be voting on this. I work a contract every year. I feed athletes, I feed volunteers, and I really don't feel it's appropriate for me to vote one way or the other. And I don't like doing that, but I think it's the right thing. So I do appreciate being involved in the discussion and asking questions, and my mind is clear and my heart is pure.
Mr. Mayor, procedural question here. So if we reject this tonight, what happens? Mr. Wilson.
It's a very good question. What you have before you is a negotiated contract between two of the three entities that are required. And if you were to reject it, it would probably go away. We're seeking support for Host City for that particular race. We're not seeking support for the 140. Unfortunately, you know, you're in a situation where more than likely the contract is negated.
So we turn down this contract tonight, there would be no Ironman next year at all.
No, we don't need any comments.
I would say that there's a very real possibility that that would happen. In the contract that we currently have, Ironman WTC has an option to cancel at any time, provided 30 days written notice for any reason without penalty.
I read the contract.
Yeah. The Chamber of Commerce has an option to cancel with month-specific notification. I can't speak for WTC. What I can speak to is the deals that have been discussed to bring it forward today, discuss a compromise that says this is what we agree to. My board voted unanimously primarily to soften the economic impact on the board and in response to the other partners. So
What does that mean?
simply meaning that if the Downtown Association, those merchants whose streets are closed, don't want an event, we certainly aren't in a position to force an event on them. And I would doubt that the city would want to be in a position to sort of force an event to continue without the appropriate funding and operating. I mean, I think it's a very difficult question that you asked, but opportunity is probably that there is no Ironman next year. There certainly would be no Ironman in 18. Excuse me, in 19 or 20.
I appreciate your answer. I know it's very difficult to second guess what they're up
Yep.
to, but it seems that there's a hope out there that somehow rejecting this contract will force WTC to come back to the city and reinstitute the big Ironman. And you don't have to comment on that. That's just my observation of what I see in the audience. And I realize hope is a very powerful thing, but, you know, there's hope, and then there's, I think, what you said, which is that, you know, the city rejects this tonight, and Ironman's going to say, so you guys aren't interested, that's okay, we'll find somewhere else. And that's capitalism.
I think your assessment might very well be 100% accurate.
Ron?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Wilson, I think, I can't speak for Woody, but I think the rest of this council will support what the chamber has done and what Ironman has done. And I would like and appreciate that if you would, the billboard putter-upper, would you let that individual know that the mayor, I guess I'm speaking for the mayor now, but I'm speaking that the mayor and this council are in support of Ironman. I'd appreciate it if you'd let that billboard putter-upper tell them that.
I would be happy to call Mr. John Stone.
Oh, wow, there was a name.
So Steve, this is obviously a very emotional issue for a lot of people. And this was a WTC decision not to move forward with that. How can we, for all of the people that are very passionate about having this race in Coeur d'Alene, how could we get, WTC is here this weekend, there's their representatives. How could we get the people that are so passionate about having the full here? And I got to tell you, if I was king, and if I could say what I would have, I'd go back to the old days. I'd have the full in June, because we all love that race, and I think we look at it, bringing 2 races into Coeur d'Alene might have really hurt the full. But I would like to see maybe if there's a spokesperson here where we could get the folks that are so passionate about having the full here, get those in a room with the WTC folks, and these folks that want to see it back can say, what can we do to bring at some point in the future that full back to Coeur d'Alene? So if, I know that young lady that spoke, she would probably give you her contact information, and if you could arrange for them to meet over in the conference room at the chamber and say, you know what, how can we move forward and get the full back? Because the full did mean so much to this community. I can remember the times of getting there early in the morning and seeing all the swimmers go in the water and hoping that everybody got out of the water, right? And the times that are our favorite time, and not that we like to see people suffer, but we like to see people accomplish their goals. And when you're down there from 11 to midnight watching all those people that are finishing that and saying that they're an Ironman, it was just a special thing to this community. But I understand numbers, I understand economics, and I'm sure that WTC does too, right? But if you could help broker that meeting to see if moving forward, if there's something that can be done, I think that would be that would be helpful.
I agree 100%, Mr. Mayor, and I'm with you. I mean, watching them take off in the morning and then coming back at 11 o'clock at night and watching those heroes cross the line, you know, I mean, that was fun. That was just something. I don't want to kill it, and I think tonight, if I voted no, I'd kill it. But I do want to tell the athletes out there, you guys brought it back. 5 years ago, you brought it back because they were going to leave town. I heard that it was leaving town, but no, they changed their mind. It can happen again. If you show the enthusiasm and the support, I think you can bring it back. And I think what the mayor said is spot on. Bring it back in June. So if you want to devote your energy towards something, do that. But I'm not going to kill the event. I don't want to do that. It's too good for the town.
Mr. Mayor, I call for the question.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Evans?
No.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
He's not voting.
Oh, sorry. Gookin?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Okay, motion carried. Thank you, Steve.
Mayor, Council, thank you. And maybe just one quick comment to those in attendance here, as well as those listening. Just before I left our office, Danny Zabel, who heads up the volunteers, she's our volunteer coordinator locally. I asked her how she was doing on volunteers for the race this Sunday. She has 1/2 of the volunteers that she had last year. So for those of you in the audience and those of you listening, and you want to do your part to assure that WTC feels welcomed and wants something in the future, give Danny a call and volunteer. She needs help, particularly in some very key locations. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Can you touch base with that young lady back there? That would be great. Thank you very much. So we'll move on now to a public hearing. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. This is ZC-1-17, a proposed zone change from light manufacturing to City C-17 zoning district at 505 West Kathleen Avenue. The applicant is Lake City Engineering. This being a quasi-judicial hearing, I will ask, does any member of the council have a conflict of interest? Seeing none, we will move on, and we'll have a presentation by Mike Beharry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a public hearing for item CC-1-17, application by Confluent Development LLC requesting a zone change from light manufacturing to C-17 on property located at 505 West Kathleen Avenue. Legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on June 3rd, 2017, and all other required notifications have been made. This is 95, and this is Kathleen Avenue. Prior to 1983, this property was located in the unincorporated area of the county. In 1983, the city made application to annex 680 acres along with zoning. And at that time, the zoning was approved and the annexation was approved, and this is what the result of this property was, split zoning. Half this property is zone C-17 and half light manufacturing. This is the full parcel of the property highlighted in red, and the area before you tonight is highlighted in yellow, and this is the light manufacturing area. The applicant's intent is to have uniform zoning over the whole parcel. Here's a bird's eye view of the property, looking southeast. Here's another bird's eye view looking north. This is 95, and this is Kathleen Avenue. This is the applicant's exhibit showing the aerial photograph along with the zoning overlaid over the top of it. And this is the red is the C-17, the light manufacturing is in gray, and the striped line is the area of request. There are 4 findings that need to be met in order for a zone change to be approved. The first finding is finding B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan indicates this area in the US 95 corridor, and the green indicates that it's in transition, and transition areas are areas that are going to change over time. This is a list of the comprehensive plan objectives as it relates to this zone change request. The full list is on page 7 of your staff report. Objective 1.12, community design. Objective 1.14, efficiency. And objective 3.16, public safety. Ensure infrastructure and essential services are available for properties in development. Finding B9, that public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. This application was routed through the city departments, and each department has indicated they are adequate public facilities and public utilities available to serve the proposed request. Full comments are on page 8 of your staff report. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. The site is generally flat with an approximate 15-foot drop in elevation towards the north and west part of the property. There are no topographical or physical constraints that would make the subject property unsuitable to change the zoning from light manufacturing to C17. Here's a topographic map of the subject property. Each of these white lines indicates a 5-foot change in elevation. You see there's a 15-foot drop approximately right here that runs along the property. Here's some site photos of the property. This is looking south along the front of the property. This is looking north. This is looking west through the property. This is looking southeast, and this is standing on the northwest corner of the property. This is also standing on the northwest part of the property looking south. The last finding is finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. The city engineer has indicated that the change from light manufacturing to C17 uses at this location is expected to be minor in terms of the amount of vehicle traffic generated. This is a zoning map of the surrounding area. See C17 to the east and to the south, and light manufacturing primarily to the west. And there's C17L on the east side of 95. The C17 district is intended as a broad spectrum commercial district that permits limited service, wholesale retail, and heavy commercial. This is a list of a few of the principal uses that would be permitted in the C7 district if this was approved. The full list is on page 14 and 15 of your staff report. I won't read the whole list, I'll just read a couple. Banks, department stores, hospitals, hotels, and many storage facilities. This is a zone change map that's recent zone changes that happened in the vicinity of this property. And in 1984 and in 1998, the zone changes from R12 to C17L were approved. And then in 1999 and 2008, zone changes from light manufacturing to C17 were approved. It's a land use map indicating the surrounding land uses. We get commercial predominantly surrounding the area. This color indicates that it's vacant, and this is civic use, and this is the Charter Academy located here. The decision point before you tonight is to consider the request zone change from light manufacturing to C17 on approximately 4.1 acres. You'll need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions that you may have, and the applicant's engineer is also here to make a presentation as well.
Questions for Mike? Don't see any at this
Okay.
time, so we will ask the applicants to come up, please.
Good evening, Mayor, council members.
We'll have Renata swear you in.
Yep, sorry.
Drew, you know the drill.
Know the drill.
All right. Do you swear the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Your Honor, council members, Drew Dittman, Lake City Engineering, 126 East Poplar Avenue in the great city of Coeur d'Alene, for the record. Here tonight representing the Confluent Development Group. I will be brief. You guys have had some tough decisions tonight. I don't envy you, but I don't think this will be one of those. The property is located at 505 West Kathleen Avenue, as Mike had said. It's the stock building site there at the intersection of Kathleen and 95. Currently, that property is about 15 acres. It is split zoned. The northwest portion of it is currently zoned light manufacturing. The remaining portion of it is zoned C17, which I've outlined here in yellow. This is the surrounding zone. So again, it's currently zoned light manufacturing in the gray area up in this corner. The rest of the property is C17. As Mike had said and outlined in the staff report and in his presentation, as you guys are well aware, Idaho code defines certain standards that must be met in order to approve a zone change. Those are outlined in your city code, and again, Mike outlined them in the staff report. I show them up here again, and I really want to touch base on one of them. Mike has kind of gone through most of them. The one I want to touch base on is the last one, B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhoods with regards to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. And really, I want to touch on land uses. So this is a copy of your generalized land use map, which shows uses, not necessarily the zone, but the use. And you can see pretty much everything around it is red, which is a commercial use, with the exception of the yellow portion here, which is vacant. And then you have the charter school here, of course. And then I followed up with the zoning map, which you can see surrounding properties to the south and east are commercial, and most properties along the Highway 95 corridor are commercial as well. With that, I think I'll answer any questions you guys might have.
Questions for Mr. Dittman? Kiki?
Because there is a school next door to this, and because of this being now any commercial use, have there been discussions with traffic patterns and flows that, because of the nature of the school being there, that this would affect?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Miller, yes. I have had conversations with Charter, and the gentleman's name escapes me at the moment, lengthy conversations, and we've actually had conversations with staff about traffic. And recently, Charter School had petitioned to make Duncan Drive, I think it is, a one-way street to help with some of the traffic circulation in the area. And I did have a lengthy conversation with Charter about the uses, about the proposed uses, and they told me they are not opposed to the zone change. Matter of fact, they had to go through a commercial zone change as well in order to do the school several years ago. And as Chris Bosley said, and it's mentioned in the staff report, the zone change in and of itself doesn't really affect traffic. It's the use, it's the future use, and those are issues that will come up during the development process, during a subdivision process, and can be more defined. But without a particular use, it's hard to say that it affects traffic. I will say that we're at the intersection of two major arterials. Probably not a much better place to have commercial use. You got 95 and Kathleen, which is one of the biggest arterials in town. So,
thank you.
Does that answer the question? Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. This is the time for public comment. Mr. Dittman's name was the only name that I have on this list right now. Is there anyone else that would like to have comment on this? So now I will close the public comment portion of this and look for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve CZC-1-17, proposed zone change from light manufacturing to C17, and adopt the Planning Commission findings.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? No discussion, so roll call, please.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yep.
Evans?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Motion carried. We'll move on to Council Bill number 17-1026, franchise agreement with Newmax LLC, doing business as Intermax Networks. Mike?
I'm back. This is a proposed franchise agreement. As we've done with other utilities, Vista most recently, it gives the company the right to use the public's right-of-way for the installation of cables or other devices that facilitate their business. In exchange for the use of the public's right-of-ways, Intermax or Newmax, doing business as Intermax, agrees to pay 5% of their annual gross revenues as essentially a rental. And it's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, be glad to answer that.
Questions for Mike?
Just Dan, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've already done this, haven't we? I mean, wasn't there like a preview to this because of the code, and then it comes
Right.
back to us?
I thought I had talked to you guys
Right.
about this. It's sort of a deja vu. Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know, I was going,
That was a general services moment, but it's, yes, we did talk about this a little bit. And so the state franchising laws that we're governed by require us to have a public hearing, and that's what we're having now. But, so, yes.
Any other questions for Mike? So we'd be looking for council action. This is way too easy.
Well, we need to find out if the public
hearing.
would like to give.
Oh, we gotta go through we could stretch this out really, really long, couldn't we? So there is I don't, is there a sign-up list? I don't have the sign-up list. So we'll open public testimony. Anyone wishing to testify on this matter? Seeing none, we will close public testimony.
Mr. Mayor,
Move for adoption of Council Bill number 17-1026.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to, to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill number 17-1026 once by title only. Is that correct, Ron?
Yep.
Okay, and Kiki seconded that. Renata, read the title, please.
Council Bill number 17-1026, an ordinance of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, granting a non-exclusive franchise to Newmax LLC, DBA Intermax Networks, Intermax, to construct, operate, and maintain a fiber optic telecommunications system with all necessary facilities within the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the city, setting forth provisions, terms, and conditions accompanying the grant of this franchise, providing for city regulations of construction, operation, maintenance, and use of the telecommunications system, prescribing penalties for the violation of its provisions, and setting an effective date.
Roll call, please.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yep.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion to adopt Council Bill 17-1026.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call one more time, Renata.
McEvers?
Oh, yes.
Gookin?
Oh, yes.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Have a safe 4th.